Hi there, and thanks for coming for the second episode of Virtual Connection. This is a podcast about teleworking, the perks, the nuances, and everything in between, sprinkled with some stories. So, today's session, I thought we could delve a little bit more deeply into what tools I use for telework. I'll start off with just general virtual platforms, what I use, what I love, and what I kind of stay away from. And then I can get into some handheld essentials that I love to use and that enhance my work when I telework. So, starting off, in my current position as a learning specialist, I do a lot of virtual delivery. That essentially means that I have meetings or trainings or just general virtual sessions and evaluations that I have online. And for these tools that I really tap into, these different virtual platforms that are offered, there's so many benefits and so many challenges to each one that I often use a smattering of all of them sometimes, depending on the client, depending on the session design, and depending on the objectives of that particular session. The first one I'll talk about is Adobe Connect. Adobe Connect is a pretty deep platform. I was just introduced to it a couple years ago. It really gives the onus on the producer of the session or the creator of the session, creator of the room. Um, I'm going to pull up a screen so you can see a little bit more about what the Adobe Connect platform looks like. From a producer perspective, it's a bit nuanced because you now have a lot of control over every aspect of the room. You can pull in these different squares, which are called pods, to generate and create a layout. And you can alternate layouts depending on how you've designed the session. So in my current position, I often use Adobe Connect for a series of client meetings. I've used it for, and I've even used it to hold meditations, to host meditations. I used to bring up a nice, really big, beautiful picture, and I would play an audio recording at the same time. So participants would be able to join, and they would be able to see this really gorgeous picture and then just be able to hear that audio track playing in the background. Um, I use Adobe Connect very frequently at work. In fact, I actually train virtual producers on how to use it and how to best maximize their use of the tool of the platform. Um, Adobe Connect is always coming out with new apps, additional pods that you can upload into the room, and they're recently rolling out some HTML5 updates, meaning that before you would have to download the actual Adobe Connect app or program onto your computer, but now they're making it a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more processed to the point where you can just open an Adobe Connect screen within your own web browser. So this alleviates a lot of the onus on the participants to have to download an additional program, an additional app, and just open it right there on their screen. Um, I really do enjoy Adobe Connect because you can also go into different breakout rooms or smaller groups. So often when we are engaging with and hosting a training of, 15 or more participants, the breakout rooms are a really wonderful opportunity for us to really tap in and make people feel more comfortable to speak in smaller groups. Because often many participants won't feel comfortable coming off of mute and speaking loud in front of everybody. So breakout rooms are a good chance to do that. Also, we use breakout rooms to kind of sort through really complicated topics in a particular meeting. So say we've only got an hour to get through a number of things. As you would do in a face-to-face session, you would invite people to join into smaller groups and parse through one topic each, and then kind of return in plenary and then summarize the discussion. So that's one really valuable way that we've also been able to implement and use these breakout rooms. On the fun side, I also really like that you can upload videos and you can kind of share your screen on Adobe Connect, because then this enables, um, I mean, the possibilities are endless, really. You can allow it to, you can show a video, you can, oftentimes what we'll do is we'll upload some music at the end of a training or a session to leave people on a really positive kind of high note where they can dance out on the session. Um, and now let's focus on some of the nuances with Adobe Connect. So the program itself is actually quite a strain on bandwidth. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you are considering who your audience is, who you're really inviting to participate in these sessions. I often will veer away from large interactive Adobe Connect sessions if we have people from very, very low bandwidth areas connecting. Just because that, you upload a video, you upload an audio bite, you include breakouts, that really does do a strain on the general connection speed of whoever's connecting. What else? Some things that are cumbersome about Adobe Connect is that before the HTML5 update, you did have some challenges with people downloading an additional app onto their screen, onto their device. So that would also deter people from joining into an Adobe Connect session. I've always tried to find some workarounds to these because I'll be honest, I think Adobe Connect is just so cool. So I will often invite people, if they can't download the app onto their work computers, there is a mobile app that you can download. It's of course not quite as interactive as a fully PC-based app, but you can still interact with the meeting. You can still interact with the chat pods and see who's speaking. So there's the mobile app that you can use on your phone or your tablet if you choose to have a tablet. And you can also contribute that way too. Um, oh my goodness. Another really phenomenal aspect of Adobe Connect is its opportunity to utilize pods as a data gathering tools. So say you're having a really high level meeting and you need to gather a lot of information in a little amount of time. There's these pods that come up that you can pull. There's chat pods, poll pods, survey pods. These are all really valuable tools to be able to gather inputs from people who don't necessarily want to come off of mute and speak into the room. You can allow them to type or to write their responses into these different pods. Also, there is some more interactive visual data gathering tools that you could use, such as generate a word cloud. There is a whiteboard functionality that allows you to draw on the screen. We've used that for voting. We've used it for anonymity so elicit responses from participants who prefer to remain anonymous. So that's just kind of a high level what I love in terms of the virtual platform. Adobe Connect is number one of my favorites. Number two, what I use and what I love about Zoom as a platform is that, contrary to Adobe Connect, Zoom really thrives off of very low bandwidth areas. So Zoom, for those of you who don't know, Zoom is a much more basic platform compared to Adobe Connect. It also does require you to download an app or the program onto your device. But then once you do download the program or the platform, you don't have to have any sort of account to log into. You can just join a session that's already been created or join a meeting that's already been created. I love that Zoom also has the functionality to provide chat boxes, I'm sorry, not chat boxes, breakout rooms. It also allows you to annotate or draw on the screen. So again, if you're eliciting responses from people who do want to share visually their inputs, you can also have that. And one of the biggest benefits I think that Zoom offers is the ease of sharing video. So even when people are connecting in these really hard to reach areas or very low internet bandwidth or latency areas, you are able to see them quite clearly. This has been really effective for everything from very high stakeholder meetings all the way down to just last week I had a gathering of friends and family just to do a sort of refresher or rejuvenator. We toasted one another on Zoom, using Zoom as a platform. I do see that many people are actually turning to Zoom as their go-to platform in this transition into a more telework lifestyle. And I think that that's just awesome. Zoom's CEO came out recently offering free licenses to different platforms, or to the Zoom license. So I'm gonna invite you to go ahead and do some research on that because I don't know exactly the semantics about it, but Zoom is really truly quite a valuable tool and platform to use for telework. What else? Uh, what I stay away from in terms of virtual platforms. So I've used a number of different virtual platforms in addition to Adobe Connect and Zoom. That includes Google Hangouts, WebEx, BlueJeans, my goodness, just so many out there. I do tend to stay away from these because I feel that, from all of my intents and purposes for work and for personal use, Adobe Connect and Zoom really cover the gambit. For quite a while, we were using Skype. I would love to use Skype. However, Skype doesn't necessarily have as many capabilities as Adobe Connect or Zoom. And for some reason, it's been really usurping my storage or my memory on my computer. So I mostly engage with Skype more as a informal back-end communication tool, less so as a virtual platform for which to hold trainings or virtual sessions. BlueJeans is very simple. The only reason I used it was because it was actually elicited from a client to use this platform. It's very basic, so I would advise against it if you were looking for a more interactive tool. Yeah, it's just no good. WebEx, I'm not quite as familiar with the back end of WebEx. I've mostly attended WebEx seminars and webinars. It also does have a lot of tools that you're able to engage with, but from the production side, virtual producer side, I don't really know too much about it. Yeah, so those are that's just like a dirty breakdown of the virtual platforms that I really love to use, and then some that I do stay away from that I'm familiar with. Oh, I didn't mention Google Hangouts. So now Google Hangouts seems to be an easy transition because so many people do use Google Hangouts chat. I use it myself. My husband David and I speak on it probably throughout the entire day. But I think for the purposes of meetings, it does serve a purpose. So it's very good to have a very direct, you know, um, very basic meeting. I would veer against it for any sort of virtual trainings or large scale meetings because it does not have that interactive side that Adobe Connect and Zoom have. I'm not even sure. I'm sure you're able to share your screen, but I don't know so much on the back end of the bandwidth implications of Google Hangouts. So that's all to say. I mean, everybody has their own preferences. These are some of the ones that I have access to and that I've experienced. I'd be curious to hear more from you. You can go ahead and email me personally at citizenoftheworld89@gmail.com. And I'd love to hear what you use. What do you love? What do you stay away from? So those are just a few of the virtual platforms that I wanted to start this session with. Now let's talk about some other tools for telework. So handheld essentials. So first and foremost, you'll see I'm always wearing it for all of these meetings, all of these kind of podcast meetings, is this USB headset with a microphone attached. So ever since I started teleworking, even before I started teleworking, this tool was something that was provided for me by my company, and it's become my best friend. When I do any sort of voiceovers, or even if I'm in any sort of virtual meetings, this USB-based headset has been a godsend. It cancels out any other noise that may be happening in the room, both for me as the listener and for everybody who I'm speaking with on the other end, because of this nifty little microphone headset piece. And then it's also, if you are doing any sort of audio voiceovers, which I often do for e-learnings, or having any sort of serious meetings, the last thing you need is any background noise getting picked up and being put onto that recording. So you can't quite tell right now, but I'm sitting in my house, which is just covered with all these trees, and right now there's so many birds that are just tweeting in the back end, lots of crows also. Fortunately, because of this headset, you're not able to hear a lot of that background noise. So this, first and foremost, is my favorite tool. Thumbs up for this telework tool. Let's see what else. I do like to use, just for time management purposes, this really neat little tool called Timular. I'm going to hold it up right now. Timular is an eight-sided die that I've downloaded an app on my phone and on my device that helps me to track my time when I am working on different projects across my company. So each side, I've marked a different project that I'm working on. And when I do transition from one project to the other, this is a very tangible, physical way for me to indicate to my brain that I am making a shift. I'm working from one project, and now I'm transitioning over to another one. So at the end of the day, once I've fulfilled my 8 hours, then I will look at the app, and it generates this really neat color-coded graph or graphic that shows me where I've spent most of my time. Of course, it is really dependent upon you actually flipping it over and making sure that it's charged. But I love to use this tool because for a long time I was having such a difficult time when I started working remotely, really just working 8 hours. I found it so difficult that, I would wake up really, really early in the morning, and then I would be working throughout the day. And then the next thing I know, the sun is setting and I've spent 10 hours on the computer. So for me, this has been a really valuable time management tool because it is kind of a physical reminder, and it's fun to play with, but it's a physical reminder for me to really just kind of flip the switch and say, okay, I'm finished with what I set forth for this project today, now on to the next. You could probably use this for not only work things, you could use it for personal things as well. I'm not sure if if time management is something that you're really passionate about, but it is a valuable tool, and you can kind of color on it and put different color-coded stickers on it, you'll see. And yeah, this is a helpful tool that I've found to be really useful for time management. What other handheld tools? This might sound a little silly, but I like to keep a lot of little toys near my desk because I am a little bit of a fidgeter. Um, I don't necessarily shake my leg or tap my pen or anything, but just having little toys near my desk that I can kind of hold on to and play along with, it helps to keep me focused. It helps to keep me on my one task for that session, for that day or for that project, whatever I'm working on. It's a good way to expend energy. I'll often just be throwing this little ball back and forth. And they're small enough that they travel. So if I'm if I'm teleworking and I am working away from my home in a coffee shop or something, I'll often just have my one little trinket that I'll take with me, and then I'll just kind of fidget with it, and it helps me to focus when I'm on a virtual call. Um, what other handheld tools do I use? I love to, oh, when I am doing long and really in-depth virtual sessions, it is helpful to be plugged into a LAN cable. That just promises, a more reliable internet connection. And if you're often the host or the producer of a virtual session, you don't want the Wi-Fi to cut out and then just boot you out of the meeting altogether, because then everybody's kind of left in darkness. So, so LAN cable, I don't know if it's necessarily a handheld essential, but it definitely is an essential when you're having virtual meetings and virtual sessions. Um, um, And call me old school, but one of my handheld essentials that I suggest having near your desk when you're working from home is a pen and a paper. There is something that can be said about handwriting notes. I often do take notes online, but in a virtual meeting or when I am teleworking, it is helpful to actually have another thing to just actually write onto, because as I said, I'm a little bit of a fidgeter, but writing handheld notes helps me to revisit what I need to go back to, and it's also kind of gratifying just to be able to scratch it off or to check it off if you have a to-do list that you've got going on. And then also, I'll see if I can pick this up and show you. I do have a whiteboard it's clear right now, but just a whiteboard. A whiteboard really helps with my creativity. It helps with my flow. If I've got some really complex ideas that I have to parse through, the whiteboard is the first place that I go to start drawing them out, because then I'm able to see more visually what I'm trying to get out of that design or out of that session. Of course, and then I have the non-essentials, but the like-to-haves. So first and foremost is Ruth Bader Ginsburg bobblehead. She kind of looks over me throughout all of my virtual sessions. She's my shiro. And then I have a few other things here and there, just like a crystal, and I gather a lot of seashells and rocks and things on my travels that sit at my desk that I think they're nice to haves, because they often remind me of, if I've had a really stressful day or something, I can just look down and see those and be taken even momentarily back to a place of beauty or of kindness that I experienced. Now I'll leave you with a story before we close this episode today. I always encourage those who I am connecting with to use a headset with a microphone, whether it's USB or not. Regardless, we don't need to be picking up your background noises. So there was one session that I was hosting when I used to live in Denmark, and this was with a lot of high-level managers from a certain organization, and we had a subject matter expert that would swoop in and share his insights on a particular topic. And so obviously it was integral that his audio worked properly. So, we did everything in advance to try and prepare him. I connected with him. I did audio tests. We made sure that every device he was using on the time of the rehearsal was the devices that he was going to be using during the time of the delivery. And the day comes, and he's decided that perhaps it was better for him to just use his iPod headsets. Or I'm sorry, his iPhone headsets. Talking like I'm old over here. His iPhone headsets. And so that wasn't necessarily what we had practiced with, and we were troubleshooting 5 minutes before the session was set to start. So it was very high stakes, very intense. I was working with him kind of in a breakout room in Adobe Connect while everyone else was in the main space, just to make sure that his audio was working properly. So his audio starts working. We hear him. He hears us. We move back into the main space, and everybody starts the session. We're getting ready to introduce him, and then all of a sudden, everything dies. Not necessarily on my end, but all of the I think it was citywide for where the majority of these people were connecting from, lost power. And so there were a handful of people, myself included, who were just on the line wondering what was happening, what we could have done. um, we I forget how, I mean, we definitely carried the conversation and started having some really robust conversation about the topic for that particular session. And then slowly people started coming back online. But if anything, that goes to show that no matter how much preparation you can put into something, no matter what platform you're using, whether or not you know which device you're using, something can always happen that you just have to shrug it off and appreciate the session for what it is, and pick up right where you left off. So that's it for today. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay connected.